In today's video, we are discussing and dealing with a GE front-load washing machine that may be leaking in some form or fashion, usually from the front of the unit. This leak could take various forms and may only happen during the spin mode or when it's filling with water, and we want to get to the bottom of that. First, to remove the dispenser, pull it out all the way, then press firmly down on the button in the back and then pull the tray out fully to remove it from the dispenser housing assembly. This is the dispenser to start. It's possible that it could just need cleaned. To open up, move to the rear of the assembly and note the two plastic retainers on the back. Pull them out and then the rear of the assembly should lift up slightly. Then use a small flat blade screwdriver or dental pick to further divide the assembly from the sides. Work your way around rather than lifting from the rear. It will pop any retaining clips that are held in place. This is the dispenser assembly on the inside once we've cleaned it. There are a few key areas of note on this assembly to clean, such as the float in the rear of the housing. Sometimes these areas could be clogged and need cleaned potentially, but check every location on the inside and out for obstructions. My tech had already cleaned this unit previous to filming, so I cannot create what he did. In the case of this unit, the obstruction wasn't inside the dispenser, it was inside the assembly. Rather, it was clogged in the rubber hoses. So to reassemble this first, we're simply going to clip the front of the housing in and then snap the rest into place. Common areas of issues would be the hose under the dispenser at the very front, which is impossible to film from this view. Soap could be building up in the cabinet, causing all kinds of issues. You would want to use a brush to clean out the dispenser housing at the hole in the very front. I'm using a dryer condenser brush turned 360 degrees to try to get to the pocket, and I'm also spraying it with cleaner to remove some of the detergent or other potential blockages. This would try to loosen up anything that would cause it to overfill or wick into the front of the washing machine, and there are other devices you could use to clean this, even spraying large amounts of water to just flush the machine. But let's say you've flushed everything from this view and it doesn't solve your issue. It's still leaking and causing issues. The chance is that there is a hose that is unhooked, the dispenser itself could be damaged, or something else is deeper that you have to inspect, or more than likely replace the entire dispenser housing. Let's go ahead and access it and get it out for replacement. Tools that you're going to need in the video are as follows: a Phillips head screwdriver and a multimeter with specialty thin leads. These thin leads are going to allow you to check specific places on the board. I'm going to have a link to a few places that you can get them from that will be in the description. The first thing we want to do is remove the detergent dispenser. To do that, pull it out as far as it can go forward without pulling it too hard. Then press the button at the rear of the dispenser and then pull it again to fully remove it. Afterwards, use a Phillips head screwdriver to remove the 5 screws from the housing that were hidden behind the dispenser we just took out. Note the style of screw, as the ones in the middle are different from those at the top and bottom on both sides. Once the screws have been removed, you can lift up on the left side of the interface panel where the screws were removed. Sometimes this can be a little difficult, but the key is that the interface will pivot up on the side about 20 degrees. Then you can push it to the right and then pull away. Know that the board will be somewhat held in place by a wire harness and cable ties, so there is a limited range of motion on this board at this point. If you wanted to get more room to maneuver the interface, these 3 wire harness clips would need pressed from the inside out and may be optional to what you're doing. With the interface and top off, you can see that detergent has damaged the front of the unit, causing these screws to be rusted. This was not fun to deal with. The van pliers I bought just for the extraction won't even work due to the rust, even after blasting the screws with cleaner. Your choices then are to access the dispenser and try to remove it without taking the front off, or taking the front off for deeper inspection via the front door bulkhead. It's kind of like a bad choose your own adventure at this point. What I would suggest to do for an easier time to handle this potentially, which I didn't do in the video in the first run through, but realized afterward, is that you could easily access the dispenser by removing the water valves here first. You can then pivot them up and out very sensitively, making it easier to access the dispenser. As a note, this scene is from a GFW 550 that we fixed a few months ago, and they have a smaller dispenser that's easier to work with. The one in the video that is gray, the GFW 650 and above, they have a much tighter fit with a larger dispenser, and you cannot remove the boxes easily, so taking the valves out to access everything from the rear may not work. To remove the dispenser for inspection or replacement, you need to start by unhooking these hoses located at the top of the larger dispenser assemblies. There's one wire harness that needs unhooked, then removed from the assembly if you have to remove or replace the whole assembly. Another way to get some access to these hoses is to pull the dispenser housing towards the rear of the system. This will dislodge the right side where it's attached to the chassis. The next step is going to be to remove the hoses that either go from the water valves to the dispenser box or the hoses on the water valves themselves. There are 4 or 5 hoses on the rear of the box that needs removed, and the camera doesn't do the best angle, but here's their locations for reference. If you find it difficult to remove the rubber hoses from the dispenser box, you can use a screwdriver to gently press into the rubber hose, then pry it away from the plastic barbs, as over time they tend to get stuck on really bad. You may be able to remove or reposition the dispenser at this point and take it out entirely, but there are multiple other hoses that we need to deal with, which is primarily the large one on the front of the unit. Then there's also one on the right side from the front, and then there is one drain hose underneath at the rear. Next, this hose is difficult to take off, but it could be potentially removed without taking the front panel of the washing machine off, but for clarity purposes, I am going to remove the front of the door. I have a video for the next few steps in depth, but as a quick tour, you take 3 screws off the bottom of the unit. You may or may not need to tilt the machine to do this. Then you're going to remove the 7 screws that hold the front of the unit to the bulkhead. Use the Phillips head screwdriver and remove the 2 screws on the plastic facade of the door lock. Once removed, pull the facade away. Then there are going to be 1 or potentially 2 screws that hold the door lock itself in place, but this one only has 1 at the top. You want to remove the screw, and then with the screw out, lift the door lock up and then press it rearward so it doesn't get caught when we go to remove the bulkhead itself. With the screws and door lock removed, we can begin to remove the front of the unit. Open the door and then lift up on the door and then start slowly pivoting it away from the washing machine. But on the left side, there's going to be a wire harness that you need to remove. You need to unclip this wire harness before you remove the front of the washing machine. Here's another angle of that harness from an older video for that explanation. Now that you have the front off, this is what you should see. You have the large primary tub hose that will come off with some regular pliers or a slip-jawed wrench. Often this location could be the cause of the issues and buildup on the machine, so you may just be able to take this off to service the hose or this area of the dispenser. There's a drain hose here on the rear of the dispenser that wasn't easily accessed until this point, and there's another difficult hose to access behind the metal plate here. You don't need to remove this plastic piece, but I forgot to film removing the hose from behind the dispenser box for reference. This was the last one we needed to do. Finally, with the 8 hoses removed, you can remove the dispenser box. You could clean it out at this point fully, or you could replace the dispenser box. Chances are you could have cleaned most of the obstructions prior to this point without the disassembly, but there are some rare cases that you had to go this far. If there's any inspection of the box, you're going to be able to free to do this at the point. You could also do the same thing with the hoses that are near the source of the leaks and track anything down. In the case of this washer's particular failure, the big hose had a clog that needed cleaned out with the brush, and we didn't need any tear down. And often I've heard that this hose could be in such bad shape that you need it replaced as well as the dispenser, but that's going to vary from model to model. If you need to purchase the dispenser box assembly or the dispenser, I'll have links to them in the description. If you use the links, it does help the channel out financially as we get a cut of the profits from the sale. And I want you to also note that the GFW 650, 850, as well as the PFW 850 and 955 models have one style super large box that we've dealt with in this video, but the GFW 550 currently has a smaller different style, and then the GFW 510 has a much different assembly as well. So each assembly is going to be different, and you need to buy the one that works specifically for your unit. However, the large dispenser hose that we focused a lot on is same for all the models of washing machines as far as I'm aware. One situation that we've seen depending on the model is there may not be a hose clamp on this, and you may be able to zip tie or use a new hose clamp to tie the rubber down onto the plastic dispenser, as some of the older models may not have had a hose clamp on them and use some sort of plastic weld that could have failed. One last note on the replacement, the wire that goes into the dispenser that we removed earlier in the video will need potentially removed from the old box and then put into the new one, which is a reed switch. It's on the underside of the box located here. Depending on your model or generation of washing machine and new dispenser, you may or may not need to swap this out. But back to the reassembly of the machine. With the new or serviced box, begin to insert it into the front of the bulkhead. you're going to need to slowly work your way around and reattach the 8 hoses that go onto the dispenser one by one. This is going to take some time, and be patient as you reinstall each hose. In my case, I felt that reinstalling the hoses went much quicker than it did taking them off in the first place. Remember to install the hose underneath in the rear first, as I think I forgot to do that on camera, and I ended up having to take it apart and put it back together. When the hoses and clamps have all been properly reinstalled, and the water valve, if you had unseated it, has been reinstalled, make sure that all the harnesses and the reed switch assembly are put back into place. There are a few plastic holders that the wires can seat into to keep it flush with the dispenser, and when everything is seated correctly, you can go ahead and reattach the dispenser to the washer chassis by sliding into place as denoted here. It will lock the rear of the assembly in place, making the front installation a little bit easier. Then go ahead and reattach these hoses on the front of the machine if you hadn't done that already. Make sure that the notch of the hose is seated properly on the dispenser as you see here. There's a groove for it to seat into. Also note the small finger that rests on the bulkhead at the front here that keeps the front box guided, as this entire assembly is rather easily moved and jostled around during the reassembly of the machine until we get the interface locked back into place. The dispenser should be fully attached at this point. Then we can just reinstall the front of the washing machine if you actually took it off. Then we can start reassembling the washing machine if you took the front off. If not, you can kind of skip ahead a little bit. You would align the door and slowly work it back into place. Make sure you install that wire harness on the left side of the door like you see. Then slide that door onto the washer chassis. There are 4 pegs that it gets affixed to. Then install any screws to the top of the bulkhead, and then tilt the unit and install the 3 screws at the bottom. Once you have that done, make sure the damper is seated into place at the top of the bulkhead before we reinstall the entire gasket system. Reattach the 3 screws once the damper is locked in place so it doesn't wiggle out when we deal with the gasket. Roll the gasket lip onto the washer door. This could be a little bit sharp, so make sure to wear gloves as needed. Now we have the task of reinstalling the gasket spring, and this is somewhat difficult. If you don't have that TSE1 removal tool that we talked about at the beginning, I do have a video showing how to use cable ties and a wrench. However, the tool makes it quite easy. You're going to attach the pins of the device onto the spring, then turn the knurled knob to expand the tool and the spring while slowly leading the wire around the lip of the door gasket. This is a very slow process for a GE because of how wide the spring is. I'm trying to be very careful on camera. This whole process took about 4 minutes to get the spring on the gasket. You can use a small hook tool or screwdriver to press the wire into the lip once the spring is compressed, then slowly back out the knob and let the wire seat onto the gasket. Shut the door, and the process is just about done. Make sure to install the door lock back into place by putting it on the latch and installing the screw that locks the door lock into place. Then use the 2 screws to install the facade to the door. Go ahead and shut the door to the unit, and the process is just about done. The next steps essentially are going to be to reinstall the top lid of the washing machine, then the interface to the bulkhead. Note that the interface will attach on the right side of the control system, first onto a larger screw, then it's going to pivot down on the left side into place and then lock in. I do have other videos of reinstallation on my channel from different angles that I think are better than I did in this one, but they're different color GEs. This is the 3rd GE front load washer I've worked on in a different color for all the problems the machine has. Then install the 5 screws to the dispenser housing and the interface. Note that the 2 screws in the middle are more of a coarse thread than the 3 outlying ones. The dispenser box may need to be held in towards the front while you install the 2 middle ones. Then the 3 outer ones secure the interface to the washer bulkhead for reference. Then reinstall the dispenser box, and this job should be done. You should have a new damper system or a main board, depending on what's happened. Thank you so much for watching this dispenser video on how to clean it and then replace it. I hope this video helped you with your GE front load washing machine. I have about 6 or 7 other videos on the GE front load washing machine. I will include a playlist for each of the things that we've done to this machine. Remember that if you did need the dispenser or other parts, I will include the links in the description to help us make more videos, and have a wonderful day.